AI companies have quietly started giving you less thinking, less performance, basically less of what you're paying for. And the reason is money. Let me explain. A few days ago, an AMD executive ran almost 7,000 tests on Claude and published the results publicly. What she found is that the model was thinking 67% less than it used to be. Not performing worse on purpose necessarily, but thinking less, putting in less effort per answer. And the head of Claude Code had to go on Hacker News within hours and address this, and he confirmed it. He said that the model would sometimes cut back on its thinking because of product changes. Now you could look at that story in isolation, say it's a little glitch, small settings change, no big deal. But it's actually a signal of something much bigger that is happening right now across all of AI. And it's worth understanding because it's a pattern that is going to continue. And here's why. Up until recently, AI companies really didn't care about being profitable. They were purely in growth mode. Get customers, build the product, and then we'll worry about money later. But that era is ending. We're now entering a phase where these AI companies genuinely need to start making money. And when profit gets involved, the product starts to change. That's why people on Twitter, which honestly I usually don't put much stock in because you can kind of say whatever, that are saying that the golden age of AI usage is ending. That freewheeling VC-subsidized era is behind us. Now, I don't think it's that dramatic, but I do think the math is about to become very real for regular users. So let's break it down. Here's the thing. Modern AI models, especially the ones that people pay for, don't just fire off an answer as soon as you hit enter. There's a reasoning phase first. The model works through the answer before you see anything. And more reasoning time generally means better answers, but it also costs more for the company to run. And Anthropic recently made 2 changes to this system quietly within a few weeks of each other. So first, in February, they switched Claude to something called adaptive thinking. And what that means in plain English is that instead of having a fixed amount of reasoning per query, now the model will by itself decide how much reasoning it should apply and then run with that. And then in March, they lowered the default effort level. So it used to be set to high and they switched it to medium. And there's no announcement, it just changed. Now this combination of things created problems. And even on certain questions, the model was allocating 0 thinking time. Like not less, just none at all. And this is where it really started hallucinating and making a bunch of mistakes. So people would notice fake package names, made up IDs, API versions that didn't even exist. And still the model sounded very confident, it moved very fast, but yet it could be very wrong. So people called this rushing to completion. It's like when you were in high school and you had an essay that you had to write, but you forgot that you had to write it. And so 2 hours before, you're just throwing out whatever comes to mind to get something on the paper. You just hope that it's right. Hope that the teacher doesn't check it too closely. And the guy who built Claude Code, his name is Boris Cherny, he confirmed this. Also, to be clear, this wasn't a malicious decision. And I don't want to be too hard on Anthropic. Honestly, I really like Anthropic. I love Claude. I think they make great products. Plus, to be fair, there are fixes to this. I'll link to some of them down below, but covering that isn't really the point of this video. But the key theme here is that the default got worse very quietly. Most people never knew about it. Okay, but so why would Anthropic even make that change? Well, to understand that, you have to understand the economics of running an AI company right now. And this is really the core because this affects every AI tool that you use, not just Claude. Let me give you an analogy. Training an AI model is like writing a textbook. It's very time consuming, it's very expensive, but then once you have it, it's done. It's a one-time cost. But then every single time that someone uses that model, the company has to run it. That is an ongoing cost. And that's where the models are very different from a textbook. But think of it here as if you had to hire a tutor that has to read from that textbook to every single student who wants to learn from it on every single thing that they're asking about. That's really expensive and the cost never stops. So back in 2024, all of the conversations about AI costs were about training the model. But by 2026, the cost of just running the model has become 55% of the budget for most AI companies. And that cost is going down actually pretty quickly, but the amount of usage is going up even faster. People love using these models. Part of the issue here is agents. Because when you use AI as a basic chatbot, you ask one question, get one answer. We can think of that as one unit of cost. Now, obviously that varies a bunch depending on how many tokens you use and things like that. If you ask a very in-depth question, that'll cost a bit more. But from a high level, just chatting with a chatbot is not that expensive. That's why it doesn't really matter if you say please or thank you. But now, more and more people are starting to use AI for agentic tasks, where you are asking the AI to string together multiple different workflows. This could be go research something, write a report, fact check this, pull in sources from this other site, put it all into a Notion doc, create some sort of automation around it. That's like 10 or 20 or 30 tasks all chained together. Those start to get really expensive. And Anthropic has estimated that the average agentic task uses up anywhere from 5 to 30 times the amount of compute that a normal chat message does. And as agents get better and better, which they continue to, people use more of them. So you can see how this keeps getting really expensive. So Anthropic is on track to spend about 12 billion training AI models this year and about 7 billion running them. Revenue is surging. They've just recently hit 30 billion in ARR. They actually passed OpenAI with this. But their gross margins are around 40%. For a software business, that's not actually that good. Basically, they're making a lot of money, but a lot of it goes right out the door for compute costs. And a good question here is, say if you are on the $20 a month Claude plan, does your $20 actually cover what it costs Anthropic to run Claude for you? And the answer is that it depends on how much you use it. If you're a light user, you're probably profitable for Anthropic. But if you're a heavy user, say you're on the Claude Max plan, you're almost certainly using up more compute costs than you are paying to Anthropic. So basically the power users are subsidized by the average users who don't use it that much. But that's not just an Anthropic issue. Sam Altman has said OpenAI deals with the same thing. He said the $200 a month pro plans actually weren't profitable because people just used them so much. And so the gap between what users pay and then what it actually costs Anthropic to provide the service is covered by VC money. Anthropic raised $30 billion this year. OpenAI raised even more than that. And part of the game to get users is to subsidize the prices. But that game can't last forever. Another interesting thing to throw in is that recently we talked about the new model Claude Mythos. And Anthropic has stated that they're not releasing that yet because it's essentially too dangerous. But there is speculation from a lot of people in the tech community, including Mark Andreessen being one, that have said it's actually just because Claude Mythos is too expensive to run. Like Anthropic can't afford it. Now, we don't really know if that's true, and I don't like to be someone who's spreading rumors, so I'm not saying that it's true. It's just people are throwing that out there. But do take a second to think about that. They've raised 30 billion in funding, but still have this model that is maybe too expensive to run right now. So then this begs the question, where does this go? Are we gonna be dealing with throttled performance and quiet trade-offs for years to come? Probably not, and here's why. The cost of running these models has decreased at a speed that is hard to believe. In late 2022, the cost to process 1 million tokens was around $20, but now it costs about 40 cents. That's about a 1,000 times reduction in 3 years. And Gartner predicts another 90% drop by 2030. But the problem is that usage is growing faster than costs are falling. As AI gets cheaper and gets better, people use it much more. It's cheaper per query, but there are exponentially more queries. Now, the reason that this doesn't break everything is because it's what they call the cloud computing playbook. So when Amazon and Microsoft were scaling up their cloud platforms early on, they did exactly this. They throttled usage, they rationed access, and they introduced tiered pricing. And they did that to manage the demand while the infrastructure caught up. They were building the infrastructure, it's just that the demand outstripped where they were at currently. So if we look historically, cloud computing went from very expensive to practically free for most use cases. The question for AI though is how long that takes and what we have to deal with in the meantime. Obviously no one knows for sure, but the guesses are to look kind of like this. In the near term, we're gonna have more of these quiet changes like the Claude thinking reduction. So we'll have some more usage limits, or there will be things that used to be included in a lower plan now moved up to a higher plan. This is kind of like the awkward middle phase. The technology and the demand is ahead of the economics. But very likely this squeeze is not permanent. The companies will figure out how to get costs under control, how to manage all of this, and we're already building out a ton more data centers so that we have the compute ability to handle all of this. That's also why every VC wants to invest in these AI companies. Although the economics are a little bit shaky right now, they believe it will work out in the end. We've seen it before with cloud computing. But that tension between cost and capability is gonna be a very interesting story in AI over the next few years. So pay attention to it. But also it's very likely that the golden age of AI usage, where things were very heavily subsidized, might be over.